Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 30th of May of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's summarize the Russian missile strike that took place during the previous 24 hours. We have the map of explosions. As you can see, some explosions took place in Kharkiv, Poltava, Dnipro, Odessa, and of course in Starokonstantinov, the town that located in the western part of Ukraine. Most of the explosions that took place in the east and the southern part were the results of work of Ukraine air defense, and most of the targets, most of the Russian missiles and drones were heading towards Starokonstantinov. For example, in front of your screen you can see the roads of Russian attack, and as you can see based on the map, most likely the Russians didn't attack Ukraine today using ballistic missiles, just drones, ground drones and cruise missiles. We still haven't received any updates about the results of Russian attack in the area, but most likely the Russians managed to deal significant damage. And I'll remind you that this is the airfield in Starokonstantinov that Ukrainians most likely are planning to use for F-16 purposes. Now let's move further. We got a lot of very interesting updates, not just about the Russian missile strike. One of the most important things is that Canada approved Ukraine's use of Western weapons against Russia. Previously, there were calls to strike through Russia with weapons supplied to Ukraine in one of the way or another. And we have a list of countries: United Kingdom, Latvia, Lithuania, Netherlands, Poland, Finland, France, Czech Republic, Sweden and Estonia. And now we see that Canada joined this club of countries who decide to attack the territory of Russian Federation. Furthermore, we have another important update from Denmark, and according to information we have, Denmark will allow Ukraine to use its F-16s to strike military targets in Russia, Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. From this perspective, from just the first view, we can say that there is nothing special. Yes, most of the countries are already allowed to attack the territory of military objects on the territory of Russian Federation. So what is so unique in this, let's say, permission from Denmark? The thing is that F-16s is not just the aircraft that is able to attack Russian stormtroopers, Russian vehicles, or to attack military objects. F-16s is a type of aircraft who can carry nuclear weapon, nuclear missiles. So basically, if we will change the statement based on the new updates I just told you, Denmark will allow Ukraine to use its F-16 to make nuclear strikes in Russia. So of course, if Ukraine had a nuclear weapon, then they had permission from Denmark to use this nuclear weapon on the territory of Russian Federation using F-16s. Furthermore, we have additional update from France. Obviously, France will send their forces very soon. Most likely, the French forces is already on the territory of Ukraine. This is not going to be a very big army. This is going to be at the first stage just a limited force, a limited group of forces, probably a few thousand soldiers, not more. But if we summarize updates about the countries who have already joined the club of, let's say, countries who allowed to attack the territory of Russian Federation, if every single country sent, let's say, 2,000-3,000 soldiers, this is going to be up to 10 brigades, so basically one military corps of foreign volunteers and foreign soldiers and officers. And the most important update about the current situation is coming from the United States of America, because according to information we have, according to Financial Times, the United States is close to offering Ukraine a security pact. The agreement would be the most significant in a series of deals Kiev has struck with NATO countries. So we see from the Western countries, from all these updates, that Ukraine is gathering allies around Ukraine. Western countries are gathering, and they're creating a real offensive fist that they're planning to use to attack not just Russia on the territory of special military operation, but also to attack Russia, let's call it, in old Russia. So, of course, very loud updates, very loud media victories from the Western countries. But the question is what Russia and Putin himself personally are going to do with all these things. And telling the truth, today I analyzed the movements of Putin, movements of what he is doing, and Russia as well. And I've made a chain of events, chain of things that happened during the previous few weeks that, to tell the truth, explains a lot. First of all, I'll remind you that the previous week, Putin and they had of Ministry of Defense and the head of, let's say, Foreign Affairs, Minister of Foreign Affairs Lavrov, visited Minsk, and they had conversation with Alexander Lukashenko. And you know that both these two countries, either Russia and Belarus, are the part of the organization of Treaty Security Organization, right? And according to Collective Security Treaty Organization, they are members of this organization. And most likely Putin arrived in Minsk with one question to the president of Belarus, whether he will join Russia if Russia asks for help. And most likely that was the strict question to the president of Belarus, and most likely the president of Belarus confirmed his readiness, because there is agreement and everybody should follow the contracts. Later we got reports that Vladimir Putin visited Uzbekistan, the country that located in the south of Russia to the south of Kazakhstan. Uzbekistan is not a part of this organization, so the question is, what was the purpose of visit of this country? And there was a very loud visit with lots of press, and this is the place where Putin stated that the current president of Ukraine is not Zelensky anymore, but Stefanchuk, the head of Ukraine parliament. So that was a very loud event, and people, let's say, in Russia tried to focus the world's attention exactly to this situation. The question, what was the purpose? And I analyze the situation, and I'll remind you that currently there is a negotiation process between Russia and the government of Afghanistan, and according to these negotiations, the Russians are about to recognize the current Afghanistan, let's say, authorities as the legal authorities. So the question is, what is the purpose from the Russian side to recognize Afghanistan as like normal civil, let's say, state without any problems with different, I'm trying to talk about, I will not, let's use these words, let's say, in loud. And the answer is very simple. As I understand, the Russians are about to start the recruitment process of people, of soldiers from Afghanistan, and then they will send these people to the special military operation, or even further to Europe. Who knows? But most likely Uzbekistan is the country between, let's say, Russia and between Afghanistan. So that's why they need to fix the issues, they need to fix the roads, they need to sign the contracts, and everything should be clear and everything should be described on the paper. So basically Uzbekistan wants to get its share, and people of Afghanistan, the soldiers, also want to get some share. They want to be recognized as well. Furthermore, we got most likely Putin reached an agreement with the authorities of Afghanistan and Uzbekistan, and most likely soon this country will be recognized by Russia, not as a terrorist state. And today we got another report that the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation visited Kazakhstan. He had a conversation with the Kazakhstan authorities, and also the same question, because after Uzbekistan there is a Kazakhstan on the road between Afghanistan to, let's say, the zone of special military operation. So that's why they wanted to handle the questions with them as well. So most likely this is the response from the Russian side to the Western countries, to the special military operation. They're planning to give opportunity to the soldiers of Afghanistan to fight on the territory of special military operation, of course, for money with the Western countries and with Ukraine. So this is like a part of answer. Maybe the Minister of let's say, in defense of, in Russia, in Kazakhstan Minister of Defense, also were talking about the participation of another member of this organization, Collective Treaty Organization, in the territory of special military operation. We can't know for sure, because this information obviously was classified, and we will understand this only if this request will come from the territory of Russian Federation, from Putin. Now let's move to the situation on the ground. The Ukrainians during the previous night continue attempts to attack the territory of Crimea with ATACMS missiles. On this video, for example, we can see how the Ukrainians were launching 6 missiles on the territory of Crimea, and according to the Russians, later they stated that they managed to bring down every single one. Furthermore, that wasn't just like attacks from ATACMS, that was also attack in the Black Sea using the, let's say, Navy drones, and the Russians managed to discover a part of Navy drones somewhere in the Black Sea. And as a result of FPV drone strikes, some of them were destroyed, but some of Ukrainian Navy drones managed to get the Russian town by the name of Chernomorsk, and as a result of attack, the Ukrainians managed to destroy few, let's say, few Russian ships, few Russian boats even. It's not even ships, it's maybe a yacht that the local rich people were using to celebrate some parties, maybe something like this. Anyway, we see that the Western countries are getting more and more involved in the special military operation, and the Russians are seeking the way how to involve also as many as possible allies on their side. So this is a very complicated situation for now. When talking about these involvements of different allies of Ukraine and Russia, we see that the situation currently develops in Ukrainian favor, but the Russians are trying to find a way how to reduce this superiority, this distance, this gap, or maybe even to overcome it. Now let's move to the situation on the ground, and first we're going to talk about Kharkiv area. We have significant number of updates. According to information we have, the Russians are about to open another front line in Zolochiv, but the Russians are not in a hurry. They're not risking because the Ukrainians managed to concentrate forces. Now the Russians are trying to reduce the Ukrainian forces as much as possible. Maybe after that they will launch an offensive, but for now they're just limiting themselves with artillery duels, counter-artillery duels, with strikes, and many other things, because for now they understand that they are not ready. The Russians are limited and they are not ready to start a full-scale operation in Zolochiv, Kazachia, Lopin, and Udi, and Ukrainians understand this well. When talking about Liptsy itself, today we got a statement that Ukrainians was also dragged to the southern outskirts of the settlement. Liptsy has a large number of foreign legions and national battalions. Mercenaries, volunteers from France, Poland, and Germany were spotted in the village by the name of Slobozhanska. So this is the village. For now, with no geolocations to confirm this piece of news, but this is update that we should discuss that received from the very reliable Russian source. When talking about Volchansk, the front line is completely static. The only update we got is some progress, probably, or how would you call this, the situation in the southern part of the northern Volchansk. If you remember a few days ago, some reliable mappers have already adjusted their maps, showing that this territory is already under complete Russian control, and we were expecting for some geolocations to confirm this piece of news, and today we got some, but we can't use this update as the video that we can use for coloring the territory. Today, the Ukrainian sources published the video of let's say the forces of the Storm Brigade Lut that we met for the first time during the battle for Klishchevka. They were a part of a group that was storming that village. On this video, we can see how the Ukrainians were counterattacking the Russians in the southern part of the northern Vovchansk. First, the Ukrainians were bombing the Russian territory, and after that, we see the Ukrainian infantry attacking and clearing the buildings. So, based on that video, we can make a conclusion that most likely the Russians managed to enter the southern part of northern Vovchansk, but later the Ukrainians made attempts to counterattack the Russian forces. For now, we are not going to change the color of the territory because we still don't have enough of evidence, enough of geolocations to confirm either the Russian or neither the Russians nor the Ukraine control. Furthermore, the Russians continue pummeling and bombing the Ukrainian positions in the central and the southern Vovchansk. The battle continues. So as you can see, the battle continues, and we can't tell for sure when exactly the battle is going to be finished. Until we receive the reports about control of industrial zone, we can't even make any projections and any estimations on possible Russian progress. On the other hand, we continue receiving significant number of updates of how the Russians continue hunting the Ukrainian armored vehicles, air defense systems, radars, many other, let's say, types of vehicles. The Russians have complete superiority in long-range and middle-range and low-range artillery duels. The Ukrainians suffer significant losses, and I'll remind you just one important thing, that since the beginning of the Kharkiv offensive operation, we haven't received even a single video confirming that Ukrainians managed to destroy at least one Russian artillery system somewhere between Belgorod and the borderlands. Even a single maybe the Ukrainians managed to destroy, maybe, but we don't know this, and we haven't seen this. Now let's move further to the north in Kupiansk direction, where the Russians continue offensive operations. As you can see, we have a lot of geolocations. The Russians activated in this area. They're hunting the Ukrainian forces, armored vehicles, tanks. After the Russians succeed in the vicinity of Kislovka, Kotlerovka, and Ivanovka, now they are focused their pressure on the town by the name of Stepovo Novoselka. The Ukrainians try to redeploy forces, but the main problem is always on this direction, used to be and continue be is the distances between Oskol river and basically the river by the name of Zheribets. The main Ukrainian positions are located along Sinkovka, Petropavlovka, Karlivka, Glushevka, Kalishevka, and the Ukrainians need to bypass significant distances if they want to redeploy forces, let's say from Petropavlovka to Kislovka, Kotlerovka. And around 12 kilometers for tanks that are moving very slow during the very poor quality of the roads. It can take hours, while one Ukrainians from one side can get another side. So it's a perfect situation for the Russians to destroy everything on the roads. So this is the main problems, and I don't think that the Ukrainians are able to hold the territory for a very long time. But on the other hand, we understand that when the Russians capture every single building, every single, let's say, village on this side, then it's going to be the same problem for the Russians. They also won't be able to move through the fields because they would be destroyed under the open air with Ukrainian FPV drones. So the only possible solution for the Ukrainians is and will be to move along the Skol River from Sinkovka to Kupin. So this is the only possible solution for the Russians, because through the fields it's going to be very difficult. We continue receiving updates about Stelmachovka. The Russians also continue hunting, destroying the Ukrainian forces, but yet without any geolocations. But we have very important geolocations from the Ukrainian side in the vicinity of Svatova. The Ukrainian forces published a series of videos of how they were hunting, destroying and attacking the Russian armored vehicles, BMP-1, BMP-2, just regular trucks with infantry reinforcement reserves. So the Ukrainians established, as you can see, complete fire control, FPV drone control over this territory, and they were hunting the Russian reinforcements and reserves who were heading from Svatova, probably in direction of Myasozharevka and Stelmachovka. So as you can see, the main concentration of fire took place exactly in this area, and most likely the Russians were using this road for sending forces to the north in direction of Zmievka, then to Kalymychiha, and from Kalymychiha to Myasozharevka. So this is the only, let's say, geolocated evidence from the Ukrainian side that confirms that probably the Russians were conducting something on this direction, but those attacks were under complete Ukrainian control, and during those attempts the Russians most likely suffered losses. We can't tell whether they're significant or not, but losses they suffered. Furthermore, we got a report that Ukrainians have redeployed their command centers from the towns by the name of Barova from this area. This was but the Ukrainians are saying that they just redeployed forces, command centers from Barova and Liman towards the town by the name of Izium. But as I understand, that wasn't like a redeployment, that was like combining. So the Ukrainians, if you remember, in the beginning of the year, the Russians have combined the Kupiansk and Liman directions into one direction, Kupiansk, and most likely the Ukrainians did the same. They basically combined the Barova direction with, let's say, central northern Kupiansk direction with the southern Kupiansk direction, Liman, into one direction, and now from the Ukrainian side, it's like Izium direction. So this is like a global Ukrainian direction, concentration of forces, one command center, one, or let's say, it's very easy now for them to operate, to coordinate the movements and the, let's say, orders and another situation from the Ukrainian side. Now let's move to Siversk area. After the Russians captured Bilogorovka, we start receiving any updates. The Russians continue bombing and pummeling the Ukrainian positions on the highest point on this direction, but without any changes on the ground, just regular military activities without any progress, let's say, on the ground. The same situation in Sporne. The village is under very heavy Russian fire with FPV drones. The Russians probably reduced the village already to ruins. Hundreds, maybe thousands of soldiers lost their lives in this area, and the Russians continue hunting for those who are still there. If we increase the numbers of this since the beginning of May, we can see just complete and total superiority from the Russian side. Every single square meter was attacked by the Russians during May, but without any attempts from the Russian side to establish complete control over this territory. Now we are moving to Chasiv Yar. We have additional updates, but not so many. We have some progress on the ground. The Ukrainian sources published the video of FPV drone strikes on the Russian forces in this area, which confirms complete Russian control. Very slowly, step by step, meter by meter, the Russians are moving further to the west. The Ukrainians show significant resistance, but I can't tell you for sure about the real Russian tactics and what are the purposes. The only thing I see that the Ukrainians still use the Western weapon with African and Iranian Middle East camouflage that is can be well discovered by the Russian satellites, and after that destroyed as a result of artillery strike. So we see some lack of time from the Ukrainian side. They haven't managed to let's say, bring the weapon and equipment to normal situation, to normal camouflage, and the Russians are using this situation. So no changes in this area. The Russians continue clearing Karlivka, clearing Chasov Yar, but without any attempts to move further on the ground. The Russians are very active in the triangle, more precisely in the square, let's call it like this, between Seversky Donetsk Donbas Canal, Ivanovskaya, and Klishevka. So this rich network of the fortifications is the main Russian target. As you can see, the Russians FPV drone this area heavily with significant number of strikes. They're hunting the Ukrainian forces, their positions, reserves, ammo depots, warehouses. The Russians are hunting on Ukrainian tanks. On this video we can see another attempt for the Ukrainian side to counterattack the Russians, to reach the line of combat contact and to attack the Russians within a distance, but as a result of artillery strike, probably the Ukrainian tank was damaged and later destroyed. So the Russians are focused in this area, while the Russians have some progress, don't have any progress in Chasov Yar. They try to clear and to finish the battle with along the Seversky Donetsk Donbas canal. Now let's move to Avdiivka. We have additional updates from this territory as well, according to information we have for now without any geolocations confirming this. The Russians continue advancing inside of the village by the name of Novoalexandrovka. They managed to improve their positions. They're moving further. So the Russians, the most important, that according to some sources, without geolocations, without 100% proofs, the Russians managed to dig in deeper inside of Novoalexandrovka. And now the Ukrainians don't have any chances to force the Russians to fall back. We can say that now it's just a matter of time when the Russians establish complete control over the village. Of course, it's not going to happen today, not tomorrow, but maybe in a week or in two. This is going to happen most likely. The most important updates are coming from Nitailova, from Karlivka water reserve. We can say that Nitailova flower is blooming, continue blooming or whatever. There we got a lot of geolocations confirming additional Russian progress. The Russians during the previous 24 hours improved their positions further to the southwest of Nitailova. This territory was captured by the Russians as a result of clearing operations. The Ukrainians were forced to fall back further to the south in direction of, let's say, these probably farms, and probably in direction of, let's say, Karlivka itself. Also, the Russians continue moving further to the west, trying to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this residential area on the Ukrainian side of Balka, Domaha area. So the Russians are pushing, and the Ukrainians are suffering losses, but yet showing some resistance. Furthermore, we got the most important updates that the Russians activated and started their offensive, let's say, in direction of this part of Karlivka, this one that located to the north of Karlivka water reservoir. Also, the Russians began moving further to the north from Nitailova in direction of Yasnobrodovka. Today we got the video that was published by the forces of, forces of Ukraine. On this video we can see the Russian attempt to clear the trenches, to answer the fortifications. We see just one personnel carrier and significant number of infantry, probably up to 20 machines, 20 soldiers landed in the area and started clearing operation and started moving further to the north. So the Russians are moving to Yasnobrodovka, and the battle for the final town, for the last town on this direction, Yasnobrodovka, has begun. Furthermore, some sources reported that the Russians managed to improve also their positions further to the west and to capture and to answer these these three lines, and they continue improving their positions further to the north. This is a very dangerous situation for the Ukrainians, because if the Russians are able to capture this territory, of course, the Russians would not be able to continue moving further to the west, because further to the west we can see very powerful and big Ukrainian stronghold, this one, and basically from this stronghold the Ukrainians will be able to stop any offensive from the Russian side. So most likely this attack is not going to take place, but from these positions the Russians will be able to establish complete fire control over the Ukrainian positions in Karlivka itself. In this residential area the Russians will be able to suppress the Ukrainian forces, and this will allow the Russians to continue moving further to the west from Nitailova to Karlivka. So the battle is going to be very difficult, probably one of the most difficult, but if the Russians are able to bypass Karlivka, then the battle for Selidova is going to start, and Kurakhova as well. So the Russians are getting closer and closer to the final battle on Donetsk direction. Now let's move further to the south. We have very interesting report from Georgievka. If you remember, during the previous probably 10 days, I talk a lot about complete absence of any updates from Georgievka direction. And today, for the first time, for the previous 2 weeks, we got the first video from the village by the name of Maximilianovka. And this is a very interesting video, because on this video we don't see very heavy clashes, storm attempts, or different other things. On this video we can see just a regular Russian FPV drone who was destroying the Ukrainian communication equipment. So most likely this is the beginning. This is the beginning of something big, because of course before any offensive operation, the first thing you need to do is to destroy communication, cameras, radars, equipment, different electronic equipment, electronic warfare equipment, before attempts to attack. Without this, the chances that you would be defeated is around 100%. So now we see that the Russians are doing this. First, they started with destroying of equipment, most likely after 3-4 days, because during the previous 12-14 days the Russians were discovering all these equipment positions. Now the Russians will destroy them, and during this small gap of time until the Ukrainians are able to restore all this equipment, the Russians will try to attack Maximilianovka, and most likely this attack is going to be very successful. The Russians most likely would be able to answer the village itself. Now let's move further to the south. We haven't received almost anything from Konstantinov, with just regular activity. Very interesting video. I'll repeat once again. Very interesting video we got from the line between Salotka and Vodyane. The video was published by the Russian forces, and from first point of view, we don't see anything special, anything interesting, nothing special, just Russian light vehicles who are crossing the fields, moving along the roads and heading towards the Ukrainian positions. Even, for example, on this part of the video, we don't see any resistance from the Ukrainian side, no strikes, nothing, no FPV drone strikes, no artillery strikes. So you might say, so what is important, so important in this video? And this is exactly the most important thing. First of all, take a look at this video, and probably for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, we see that the Russians are conducting offensive operation with the lightest type of vehicle ever that exist in the Russian army. This is the Tigers. Race or Tiger. The Russians have light vehicles. They're armored, of course. They have some armor. This is not something empty. They have armor, but this is light vehicles. Now when the Russians enter the fields, the Ukrainians start bombing them, but I can't even understand what kind of weapon the Ukrainians were using to bomb the Russians. Probably something useless, as I understand, and you see no resistance from the Ukrainian side. You may say, so, and this absence of any resistance can mean a lot, and we will discuss this in a moment. Once again, the Russians for this offensive were using the lightest vehicles ever. Probably the lighter are just the motorcycles and bikes. But for example, when the Russians reached the line of combat contact, we see that the Russians were suppressing the Ukrainian positions. So that means that they were Ukrainians. Their positions, the trenches weren't empty. They were Ukrainians, but the Ukrainians show no resistance. So what was that? Light vehicles. First of all, few things. Maybe the Ukrainians have problems with supply and support. Possibly, yes, possibly. We discussed a lot that from the forces of 79th Brigade that most of the ammo currently is transferring to Kharkiv direction, so they do have some problems with this. So maybe the Ukrainians on this direction didn't have any, let's say, FPV drones, or they were so far, or they were too busy, so they decided to give up position and not even to show resistance, let's say, to. And that's it. The second thing is that probably the Russians found some solution how to, let's say, bypass the large territories without any resistance. And today, for example, this morning there was a video report that the Russians created a very, let's say, small electronic warfare equipment. And for example, on this video, we can see that race or that Tiger light vehicle. We see this equipment was established on the base of the car of this armored vehicle, and using these armored vehicles we saw attack. So as I understand, the Russians were testing this type of weapon, and most likely, as you can see, the Ukrainians haven't made even a single attack on Russian positions. So maybe the Russians demonstrated us and shown us the use of this new electronic warfare equipment that can shield light vehicles completely, and we see once again no resistance from the Ukrainian side. We will follow the situation. We need more details and updates to make, let's say, 100% conclusions, but maybe the Russians found a solution how to fight with the Ukrainian drones. Now let's move further to Staromayorsk-Urozhaine. As you can see, no updates after significant progress during the previous few days. Now we see complete absence of anything. So that means that a few things, most likely the Russians finished the battle either for Staromayorsk and about to finish the battle for, let's say, strategical part of Urozhaine. Now the Russians are about to finish declaring operation. Most likely before the end of the week, before the Sunday, Russia will announce about complete control over the territory. Rabotina, Malotokmachka, no updates, just regular activity without any interesting changes on the ground or any interesting attacks, neither from the Russian nor from the Ukrainian side. Also, we have important statement that the Russians finished the building of the logistic roads to Crimea along the Azov Sea. From now on, the Russians are no longer need Crimean Bridge. Now Crimean Bridge is just a symbol of Russia that they still control the situation. And even if the Ukrainians are able to destroy Crimean Bridge in many parts all over the entire length of the bridge, for now it's not a problem for Russia, because they finish the building of the railway connection of Crimea with the mainland along through Melitopol, Tokmak, so along the southern part of Zaporozhye area. So this is of course very important achievement. Now the Russians know they're completely secured, and regarding the possible developments of the situation, they know for sure that they will not lose supply and support of Crimea, never. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.